I also found out why I should never reveal why to others. A little knowledge withheld is a great advantage one should store for future use. That is the power of chess. It is a game of secrets in which one must show and never tell. I love the secrets I found within the 64 black and white squares. I carefully drew a handmade chessboard and pinned it to the wall next to my bed, where I would stare for hours at imaginary battles. Soon I no longer lost any games or lifesavers, but I lost my adversaries. Winston and Vincent decided that they were more interested in roaming the streets after school in their Hopalong Cassidy cowboy hats. On a cold spring afternoon, while walking home from school, I detoured through the playground at the end of our alley. I saw a group of old men, two seated across a folding table playing a game of chess, others smoking pipes, eating peanuts, and watching. I ran home and grabbed Vincent's chess set, which was bound in a cardboard box with rubber bands. I also carefully selected 2 prize rolls of lifesavers. I came back to the park and approached a man who was observing the game. "Want to play?" I asked him. His face widened with surprise, and he grinned as he looked at the box under my arm. "Little sister, been a long time since I played with dolls," he said, smiling benevolently. I quickly put the box down next to him on the bench and displayed my retort. Lao Po, as he allowed me to call him, turned out to be a much better player than my brothers. I lost many games and many lifesavers. But over the weeks, with each diminishing roll of candies, I added new secrets. Lao Po gave me the names: the double attack from the east and west shores, throwing stones on the drowning man, the sudden meeting of the clan, the surprise from the sleeping guard, the humble servant who kills the king, sand in the eyes of advancing forces, a double killing without blood. There were also the fine points of chess etiquette. Keep captured men in neat rows, as well-tended prisoners. Never announce check with vanity, lest someone with an unseen sword slit your throat. Never hurl pieces into the sandbox after you have lost a game, because then you must find them again, by yourself, after apologizing to all around you. By the end of the summer, Lao Po had taught me all he knew, and I had become a better chess player. A small weekend crowd of Chinese people and tourists would gather as I played and defeated my opponents one by one. My mother would join the crowds during these outdoor exhibition games. She sat proudly on the bench, telling my admirers with proper Chinese humility is luck. A man who watched me play in the park suggested that my mother allow me to play in local chess tournaments. My mother smiled graciously and answered that meant nothing. I desperately wanted to go, but I bit back my tongue. I knew she would not let me play among strangers. So as we walked home, I said in a small voice that I didn't want to play in a local tournament. They would have American rules. If I lost, I would bring shame on my family. "It's shame you fall down nobody push you," said my mother. During my first tournament, my mother sat with me in the front row as I waited for my turn. I frequently bounced my legs to unstick them from the cold metal seat of the folding chair. When my name was called, I leapt up. My mother unwrapped something in her lap. It was her Chang, a small tablet of red jade which held the sun's fire. "Is luck," she whispered, and tucked it into my dress pocket. I turned to my opponent, a 15-year-old boy from Oakland. He looked at me, wrinkling his nose. As I began to play, the boy disappeared, the color ran out of the room, and I saw only my white pieces and his black ones waiting on the other side. A light wind began blowing past my ears. I whispered secrets only I could hear. "Below from the south," it murmured. "The wind leaves no trail." I saw a clear path, the traps to avoid. The crowd rustled. "Shh, shh," as the corners of the room. The wind blew stronger. "Throw sand from the east to distract him." The king came forward ready for the sacrifice. The wind hissed louder and louder. "Blow, blow, blow! He cannot see! He is blind now! Make him lean away from the wind so he's easier to knock down." "Check," I said, as the wind roared with laughter. The wind died down to little puffs, my own breath. My mother placed my first trophy next to a new plastic chess set that the neighborhood Tao Society had given to me. As she wiped each piece with a soft cloth, she said, "Next time win more, lose less." "Ma, it's not how many pieces you lose," I said. "Sometimes you need to lose pieces to get ahead. Better to lose less, if you really need." At the next tournament, I won again, but it was my mother who wore the triumphant grin. "Lost 8 pieces this time. Last time was 11. What'd I tell you? Better off lose less." I was annoyed, but I couldn't say anything. I attended more tournaments, each one farther away from home. I won all games in all divisions. The Chinese bakery downstairs from our flat displayed my growing collection of trophies in its window, amidst the dust-covered cakes that were never picked up. The day after I won an important regional tournament, the window encased a fresh sheet cake with whipped cream frosting and red script saying, "Congratulations, Waverly Young, Chinatown chess champion." Soon after that, a flower shop, headstone engraver, and funeral parlor offered to sponsor me in national tournaments. That's when my mother decided I no longer had to do the dishes. Winston and Vincent had to do my chores. "Why does she get to play and we do all the work?" complained Vincent. "It's new American rules," said my mother. "May play, squeeze all her brains out for win chess. You play, we're squeeze towel." By my 9th birthday, I was a national chess champion. I was still some 429 points away from the Grand Master status, but I was touted as the great American hope, a child prodigy, and a girl to boot. They ran a photo of me in Life magazine next to a quote in which Bobby Fischer said, "There'll never be a woman Grand Master." "Your move, Bobby," said the caption. The day they took the magazine picture, I wore neatly plaited braids clipped with plastic barrettes trimmed with rhinestones. I was playing in a large high school auditorium that echoed with phlegmy coughs and squeaky rubber knobs of chair legs sliding across freshly waxed wooden floors. Seated across from me was an American man, about the same age as Lao Po, maybe 50. I remember that his sweaty brow seemed to weep at my every move. He wore a dark, malodorous suit. One of his pockets was stuffed with a great white kerchief, on which he wiped his palm before sweeping his hand over the chosen chess piece with great flourish. In my crisp pink and white dress with scratchy lace at the neck, one of 2 my mother had sewn for these special occasions, I would clasp my hands under my chin, the delicate points of my elbows poised lightly on the table in the manner my mother had shown me for posing for the press. I'd swing my patient leather shoes back and forth like an impatient child riding on a school bus. Then I would pause, suck in my lips, twirl my chosen piece in midair as if undecided, and then firmly plant it in its new threatening place, with a triumphant smile thrown back at my opponent for good measure. I no longer played in the alley of Waverly Place. I never visited the playground where the pigeons and old men gathered. I went to school, then directly home to learn new chess secrets, cleverly concealed advantages, more escape routes. But I found it difficult to concentrate at home. My mother had a habit of standing over me while I plotted out my games. I think she thought of herself as my protective ally. Her lips would be sealed tight, and after each move I made, a soft would escape from her nose. "Ma, I can't practice when you stand there like that," I said one day. She retreated to the kitchen and made loud noises with the pots and pans. When the crashing stopped, I could see out the corner of my eye that she was standing in the doorway. Only this one came out of her tight throat. My parents made many concessions to allow me to practice. One time I complained that the bedroom I shared was so noisy I couldn't think. Therefore, my brother slept in a bed in a living room facing from the street. I said I couldn't finish my rice, my head didn't work right when my stomach was too full. I left the table with half-finished bowls and nobody complained. But there was one duty I couldn't avoid. I had to accompany my mother on Saturday market days when I had no tournament to play. My mother would proudly walk with me, visiting many shops, buying very little. This my daughter, Wavely Jung, she said to whoever looked her way. One day after we left the shop, I said under my breath, I wish you wouldn't do that, telling everybody I'm your daughter. My mother stopped walking. Crowds of people with heavy bags pushed past us on the sidewalk, bumping into first one shoulder, then another. So shame be with mother? She grasped my hand even tighter as she glared at me. I looked down. It's not that. It's just so obvious. It's so embarrassing. Embarrass you, be my daughter? Her voice was cracking with anger. That's not what I meant. That's not what I said. What you say? I knew it was a mistake to say anything more, but I heard my voice speaking. Why do you have to use me to show off? If you want to show off, then why don't you learn to play chess? My mother's eyes turned into dangerous black slits. She had no words for me, just sharp silence. I felt the wind rushing around my hot ears. I jerked my hand out of my mother's tight grasp and spun around, knocking into an old woman. Her bag of groceries spilled to the ground. Stupid girl, my mother and woman cried. Oranges and tin cans careened down the sidewalk. As my mother stooped to help the old woman pick up the escaping food, I took off. I raced down the street, dashing between people, not looking back as my mother screamed shrilly, May-May! May-May! I fled down an alley, past dark curtained shops and merchants washing the grime off their windows. I sped into the sunlight, into a large street crowded with tourists examining trinkets and souvenirs. I ducked into another dark alley, down another street, up another alley. I ran until it hurt and I realized I had nowhere to go, that I was not running from anything. The alleys contained no escape routes. My breath came out like angry smoke. It was cold. I sat down on an upturned plastic pail next to a stack of empty boxes, cupping my chin with my hands, thinking hard. I imagined my mother, first walking briskly down one street or another looking for me, then giving up and returning home to await my arrival. After 2 hours, I stood up on creaking legs and slowly walked home. The alley was quiet, and I could see the yellow lights shining out from our flat like two tigers' eyes in the night. I climbed the 16 steps to the door, advancing quietly up each one so as not to make any warning sounds. I turned the knob. The door was locked. I heard a chair moving, quick steps, the locks turning, click, 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 and the door opened. About time you got home, said Vincent. Boy, are you in trouble. He slid back to the dinner table. On a platter there were remains of a large fish, its fleshy head still connected to the bones swimming upstream in vain escape. Standing there waiting for my punishment, I heard my mother speak in a dry voice. We not concerning this girl. This girl not have concerning for us. Nobody looked at me. Bone chopsticks clinked against the inside of bowls being emptied into hungry mouths. I walked into my room, closed the door, and lay down on my bed. The room was dark, the ceiling filled with shadows from the dinner-time lights of neighboring flats. In my head, I saw a chessboard with 64 black and white squares. Opposite me was my opponent, 2 angry black slits. She wore a triumphant smile. Strongest wind cannot be seen, she said. Her black men advanced across the plain, slowly marching to each successive level as a single unit. My white pieces screamed as they scurried and fell off the board one by one. As her men drew closer to my edge, I felt myself growing light. I rose up into the air and flew out the window. Higher and higher above the alley, over the tops of tiled roofs, where I was gathered up by the wind and pushed up toward the night sky until everything below me disappeared and I was alone. I closed my eyes and pondered my next move.